r/AskReddit by Reddit Stories. What's a law that is rarely enforced? In Denver, it is illegal to lend a vacuum cleaner to your neighbor. Well, illegal to lend a vacuum to a next-door neighbor, but it's perfectly okay to lend a vacuum to a friend down the street. I can't believe there isn't a task force dedicated to putting these people away. Might I ask, why? Law and Order, Special Vacuum Unit never took off tbh. Right? My next-door neighbor came over asking me for my vacuum cleaner the other day. Once I saw the cop car patrolling down my street, I told her to fuck off. Bitch tried to set me up. Pubs in Australia are legally required to provide somewhere to hitch and water your horse. They don't. They're also meant to cut you off before you get too drunk. This really irks me. It's been a massive pain every time I've visited Australia. Sons of bitches. Someone alert the authorities. I must be living in the 1800s then, because every pub I've been to still has a hitching post. Only in Australia. In the UK it's illegal to handle a salmon under suspicious circumstances. Is that fucking fish Jenga? The British royal family also has the right to claim ownership of all unmarked mute swans swimming in open waters. Which raises the question, how do they mark mute swans? We flew a kite in a public space. This section creates an offence in England and Wales or Scotland for any person who receives or disposes of any salmon in circumstances where they believe, or could reasonably believe, that the salmon has been illegally fished. Essentially, this is a provision aimed at reducing salmon poaching by making the handling of poached salmon a criminal offence. I dearly love some of our laws. That quote is only weird when taken out of context. On context, it is referred to illegal poaching and transporting of illegally obtained salmon. Giving alcohol to an intoxicated person. Practically every country forbids to sell alcohol to someone already drunk. But it's very rarely enforced. It helps bat keepers to tell people they won't be served anymore, though. Edit, barkeepers. Not bat keepers. In university I tried my hand at driving taxi for some extra cash. It was funny to learn from the city there were a couple of reasons I could refuse a fare. One being if the person was drunk. Basically the same, used in case somebody was really drunk. I did do it twice. Once a sober guy caring care of his friend came up to ask for a ride and his friend kicked my window so hard I still don't know how it didn't break. The sober guy just looked at me and said, "You're not going to take us, are you?" "Sorry, no." I said. He understood. Another time some guy put this guy in my car so drunk he couldn't speak. Couldn't tell me where was going. I felt bad for the guy and was going to drive him home for free. But nobody knew him, he couldn't tell me anything. Didn't even understand to give him some ID so I could figure it out. I had to talk him into getting out so somebody else could help him. I disagree, it's enforced very often, just not anywhere near as often as it should be. The bat keepers probably shouldn't be serving people anymore either. On my 22nd birthday I went on a pub crawl. By pub 9 I was 3 sheets, and when I sat down in my bar stool I tipped right over and fell flat on my back. The bartender looks over the bar, asks if I'm okay. I pick my drunk ass up, brush myself off, and ask him for a beer. He poured me one. Fuck no, in New Zealand if you're tipsy and go into a liquor store you'll get a look then a nah mate. Not as bad going into a club but we are good at acting sober us New Zealanders. Bat keepers. I'll have a pint of Coronas, please. In the US they're called dram shop laws, and they weren't criminal, it was more like a civil remedy. If a drunk driver hit you, you could sue the bar for over-serving the driver. I think they are still on the books in most states but they're rarely used these days since insurance companies usually pay out whatever damages an injured person might have. Bars will still cut people off sometimes, but that usually isn't because of the law, it's just out of I don't know, smart bar policy. Bat keepers. In Portugal, peeing in the ocean is illegal. Can't imagine how anyone's gonna enforce that. Cops gonna swim near you to feel if the water is unusually warm. Coast Guard, local police marine units have probably witnessed that during the course of their duties. Not that impossible. Is it specified that peeing is illegal? Or is the law to do with discharging black water at sea, usually from a boat, and then some court used that law to fine people peeing as well? Oral sex is against the law in many areas. Where is it against the law? Lawrence v. Texas likely ended those laws. To give or receive. Same with cheating on your spouse. In some states, it's actually still illegal to have sex with someone outside of marriage. How do you enforce that? Excessively toothy BJs should be. If you're doing it a place that you could get caught, chances are you're breaking other laws too. In South Carolina, when approaching a blind intersection in an automobile, you must discharge a firearm 3 times into the air to warn horse traffic. Coincidentally, 3 gunshots spaced 5 seconds apart is the standard way to let people know you are lost in the woods and help them find where you are, especially while hunting. Not really a law, just interesting / potentially useful information. It would be so much more entertaining to drive in South Carolina if this was enforced. So, if I actually fired a gun 3 times in the air at a blind intersection, in front of a cop, it'd be legal? Furiously books vacation. That is the worst possible way to warn horse traffic of something. They follow that law very well in Myrtle Beach. This is the most American thing I have seen today. There is a law in Singapore that not flushing a toilet is illegal and incurs a fine of $150. It isn't as enforced as other laws though. That's one that needs to be enforced all over. Singapore is such a fine country. Up here in Alaska we have a law that states no vehicles other than state troopers and Alaska pipeline vehicles are allowed on the pipeline trails. Nobody enforces this, and the trails are regularly used as a way to get to hunting trails and gold mining operations. So really to enforce said law would be to cut off about half of Alaska's infrastructure. I guess that is there to stop any kind of protesters using those roads to move to the drilling sites. Also easily remove / detain anyone you even slightly suspect is fucking around with the pipeline. Don't even need to write down any suspicion, just remove them because they got there by the road. In Idaho, you can't fish from the back of a giraffe. That's why I've always thought of myself as a Wyoming kind of guy. Honestly, I can't do that anywhere. I feel half of these types of laws were made by using earmarks in bills in protest. In order to get some law passed, Bob was like, fuck it, might as well make it illegal to fish from a back of a giraffe. How are people complaining that face masks take away their freedom when they are never even referencing this? Under California Vehicle Code 26708 subdivision A, 2, a person shall not drive a car with any object or material placed, affixed, or installed on the vehicle which obstructs or reduces the driver's clear view through the windshield or side windows. Which includes anything ranging from air fresheners to graduation tassels. A cop can't pull you over because you look like you are the type of person that has been doing something illegal or it's harassment. They can pull you over for having an obstructed view and then claim to smell marijuana and search your car. If you're a dick about it, they'll hold you without charge for 24 hours. Legal loopholes, man. That's why you shouldn't have a bad cop, no donut sticker on your back window. I don't know what the legal precedent is on that, but I certainly think one could argue that something as small as an air freshener does not obstruct a driver's clear view, particularly since it's higher and to the right of the driver's center of vision, thus it can't possibly block a view of the road. Only a small section, far less than the size of a vehicle. They enforce this in the movie End of Watch, which is the only reason I know about this law. I'd be very surprised if this isn't enforced and additionally used as the pretext to stop a vehicle and then go fishing for other stuff like drugs, drinking, etc. etc. It's illegal to eat a donut while walking backwards in Marion, Ohio. As well it should be. Freaking monsters. It's also illegal to fish on the Kentucky side of the Ohio River unless you have a fishing license from Indiana. There's another one about walking with an ice cream cone in your back pocket. I want to say some southern state. Ever since the accident. I'd like to know the story behind how this law came into effect. Why though? In my hometown, it's illegal to walk down the sidewalk on a Sunday with an ice cream cone in your back pocket. I honestly just want to know who did this and caused problems enough that it needed to be made illegal. Edit. Apparently the idea is that horses love ice cream and that the ice cream in the back pocket is a way to lure another man's horse away from wherever it is. It's an anti-horse theft measure. Thanks Google. Grand Theft Horzo on all other days is acceptable though. I'm just trying to work out who puts an ice cream cone in their back pocket. I mean, if it was something like a icy pole that is still in its wrapper, okay, but a cone is just going to get ice cream all over the seat of your jeans. Who does this? Why Sundays? They know that is the horse's cheat day? In Western Australia it is illegal to carry more than 20 kilograms of potatoes. Wasn't this actually enforced a few years ago? My memory is hazy, but I remember the owner of the Spud Shed supermarket chain was charged for hoarding potatoes. 50 kg. Why isn't this enforced? What sort of sick fuck carries 20 kilograms of potatoes? Watching movies illegally for free online. They tend to go after the people distributing them, not watching them. You wouldn't download a car. Yet I believe it was allowed to download it in the Netherlands, but not upload it. As a law historian, this is perfect. In the UK, if a taxi is traveling with a hay bale at speeds over 25 miles per hour, they must have a horse-drawn carriage in front brandishing a red flag as a caution. I remember Kansas and some other states I have lived in had a few interesting laws to say the least. I remember one was the illegality of hunting whales. In Kansas, it's landlocked and it is not possible to find whales. It's also illegal to hunt rabbits while hanging from the side of a boat. In Manhattan, there was an ordinance wherein so long as a person had a towel and a bar of soap while naked and near a body or water or during heavy rain, it was legal to bathe oneself. However, public nudity remained illegal in the city as well, so this loophole was still punishable by law enforcement, thus why the ordinance then. I remember one was the illegality of hunting whales. In Kansas, it's landlocked and it is not possible to find whales. It's because the laws weren't meant for whales specifically. They specify wildlife and livestock, and from wildlife they specify game animals and non-game animals. Laws like this usually list what the game animals are and anything else are considered non-game, therefore illegal to hunt. With that line of reasoning, it's illegal to hunt kangaroos, gorillas, and giant squids in Kansas. At least where I live, apparently it's illegal to ride a bicycle without a helmet, but honestly no one cares. Same with where I live, but it was actually enforced fairly strictly. I know a couple of kids who got a ride home in a police car for not wearing a helmet. There's a legend in Argentina and some other Latin countries about an animal called lobizon. As the story says, if you have 7 children and the 7th one is a male, all the nights with a full moon, he will transform himself in like a werewolf. It really looks alike. Okay, so, since the 19th century, if any woman told the president about her 7th child was a male, the president would be his godfather. Also, in 1973, the government created a law, 20.843, which basically says that if your 7th child is a male, the president will give him scholarships for elementary and high school, and he'll be his godfather. Did they need to boost the birth rate or something? That's so weird. In Germany we actually had THS law as well. I don't know if it still exists, but my dad was the 7th child in his family, so it applied to him. Separating abused children from their families. It would be mind-blowing to some people how rarely this is actually done. I think when a lot of us think about calling child welfare, we think a nice lady is going to show up and some mother will be woefully wailing for their child. With social workers so overworked, the amount of kids who slip through the cracks is absolutely staggering, even with the limited, and often protected, statistics on the topic. The idea is that removing children from their families is very traumatic, as if being abused is less traumatic, and the state just doesn't have the resources to rehome all these kids with fosters. So, the parents say, oh, they fell. The kid nods obediently and the cycle continues, abuse often worsening once social workers get involved. It's just a mess. My dad grew up in the system. It's tough, but better than being abused or worse. Edited, typo. I was 16. The social worker looked at me in my eyes and said, I believe you, but I can't take you from the home, even if that's what you want. When I asked if I could at least stay with a friend, he said, you'd have to ask your parents. Oh word, you mean my abusers? 4 years later, my dream is to go to law school to become a juvenile attorney. I'm going to fight for those kids the way I needed somebody to fight for me. I have an aunt who got hooked on meth with her husband and had all 3 of their kids taken away from them and placed with their mother. In the same house where the abuse was taking place and meth was being smoked. I feel like the system has good intentions, but now that it's been 10 years and I've seen how those kids turned out, I can't help but think more could have been done. Have you watched the trials of Gabriel Fernandez on Netflix? Gut-wrenching example of this. This is so highly dependent on your local department. Some are so bad a kid that's obviously being severely beaten is left alone until they turn up dead, others have at least temporarily removed children or tried for ridiculous reasons, like the time an 11-year-old was taken because he was locked out and sitting in the yard for 2 hours after forgetting his keys after walking home from school. They were in court discussing the removal order and it only got denied because the kid himself begged the judge not to do it. Other families have had CPS detain kids and try to get removal to foster care orders for walking to the park a block away at 10, and walking the dog in front of the house at 9. Then one time police and social workers conducted a middle-of-the-night home search and strip search of a small child because earlier the parents let him wait in the car for 10 minutes on a cool day. One of my older sisters got a boyfriend in high school and was always trying to sneak away with him. My parents didn't approve and kept tightening the strings, so she told some people at school that she was being abused. Someone called CPS and word got back around to us that they were going to do a home visit. Thing was, we were being abused. My dad was an avid physical/emotional abuser since before I was born. He beat all 8 kids and my mom for the dumbest things, like spilled milk, but since we were religious it was easy to put up a front. First of all, my dad's parents never believed my mom when she first told them he was beating her, so she stopped telling people. He threatened her life if she ever mentioned anything to the bishop, so everyone at church thought we were a great, happy family. There were no drugs or alcohol in the house. All the kids had been keeping the secret hidden from friends and teachers at school. This was the first time anyone had broken the silence and actually said something to someone, but my sister caught a lot of backlash from the family for airing dirty laundry. We had a family meeting before the CPS worker arrived. The discussion was basically around the fact that we all knew everyone had been abused to the point where my dad would likely serve time if we weren't careful. My parents didn't coach us on what to say because they didn't want anything to come off as canned to the worker. I had no idea what questions were going to be asked. All I knew was that my mom couldn't possibly support all 8 of us kids on her own. The same idea had been drilled into our heads during that family meeting: foster care is awful, all the kids would be split up into separate families, our new families could just as well be abusive, and things were much better the way they were. The CPS lady talked to each of us individually. She asked a lot of random questions, most of which I felt had nothing to do with what was going on in the house. I used that to my advantage. I felt uncomfortable lying about being beaten, but luckily she didn't ask about emotional abuse. I focused on the questions I was able to answer definitively. Yes, we were being fed regularly. In fact, we always had food available when we needed it. No, I wasn't getting bad grades or getting into trouble at school. In fact, I had really good grades and all my teachers liked me. No, I don't have any bruises, at least I didn't that day. I was thankful she was asking all the wrong questions because it made it easier to lie by omission. Nothing ended up coming from the CPS visit. Not one of the kids tattled. People at school started to believe my sister had lied about the abuse just to get away from overprotective parents so she could do what she wanted with her boyfriend. Before that incident, I had always thought CPS was like the FBI in TV shows, doing investigations and eventually figuring out all the bad guys' secrets. I was honestly surprised that we were able to trick them so easily. This shouldn't be a pass for abusing parents, but a condemnation on the system. We really need to allocate more resources there. A ton of shit parents deserve to permanently lose their kids and be sterilized, and it's a shame how little this happens. It's pretty random, but the laws for keeping chickens, depending on your city. Found this out when my family got chickens and we learned you're only allowed a certain amount of chickens and have to pay for a permit, and have to keep them in a coop. A bunch of my friends' families got chickens too. This was a weird trend. I don't know, we lived in the suburbs too, and none of them got permits and only a few made coops for them. Unless you got snitchy neighbors, no one really cares. You know that chicken coops can only have 2 doors. See, if they had 4 doors they'd be chicken sedans. We had pet chickens and a lot of other people around town did as well. A renter next door didn't like the noise, which was nowhere near as loud as the dogs that howled all hours of the night all around us, so she complained to the city long enough that a new law was made making chickens illegal. Long story short, she moved a week before the law kicked in and we had to lose our pets that we had for months before she moved in. There are still a few chicken coops in our area and it pisses me off so much that we had to get rid of our pets because of her and the city not wanting to enforce the guidelines we followed. I remember the chicken trend. It was 'cause they got tax credits for them or some. Jaywalking. See, this law is bull crap. It was put in place by auto companies so they wouldn't be blamed for accidents and is only used to arrest someone for no good reason. Edit, the enforcement of this law. I worked for FedEx and a cop hid around a corner so that he could watch me walk across the street to deliver a package and then walk back across the street to get back into my van. He gave me 2 jaywalking tickets. What a dick. What is jaywalking? I strictly obey almost every other law but for some reason get some sick joy out of jaywalking in front of cop cars. Eating an orange in your bathtub. It's actually illegal in California to do this, but it's never enforced for conspicuous reasons. This is a law because back then they thought the orange could cause bath oils to catch on fire or something like that. You technically can't take pictures of the Eiffel Tower at night because the lights on the tower are trademarked or something. But it's not really enforced. Also, I'm pretty sure the US flag code legally cannot be enforced. You can take pics of it but you cannot use them in commercial works as it's copyrighted. Also, the flag codes are guidelines, not laws. There is no enforcement mechanism or penalty. It's not like there is a law making or illegal to enforce another law, in this case at least. I'd appreciate it if you liked and subscribed.